All right, welcome back to the WCNC Live Impact Studio. I am Sports Director Nick Carboni. We are 2 weeks away from the NFL Draft, Thursday, April 24th from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So we are doing weekly catch-ups with beat reporters for the Carolina Panthers, which of course own the number 8 pick in the first round, a whole lot of picks after that. So this week my guest is none other than Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer, who is trying to find a place to watch the Phillies-Braves game tonight. So Mike, good luck with that, but thanks for spending some time with us.
Did I just screw up your intro by talking in the middle of it? Because you just powered through it, and I just said something. But I know this isn't great radio, but I'm
professional broadcasting, Mike. I will step over you anytime I want. So you can find Mike. You can find Mike on X at Mike_E_K. Kaye. Mike, I just want to get to this. You spent a lot of time with Dan Morgan and Dave Canales between, combine, league meetings, and really insightful article that I'm going to repost at the top of my feed when this comes out, so people can check it out. And there are a lot of intriguing things and insightful things that Dan Morgan said about philosophy on defense through free agency. I guess just in your view, how much their defense is better here on April 10th than it was at the end of the season? How much better is it through free agency?
Well, I think it's better. I mean, you made it sound like we went water skiing together, but I mean,
didn't you? Did you not?
No, actually,
you were in the right spot.
Yeah, I mean, we were. Yeah, I think they feel like the defense is significantly better. They knew it was a dire need for them. It was a situation where I think, Dan Morgan very bluntly said, they were getting tossed around up front. Their tackling was poor. Like, there was a lot to fix there, and they couldn't ignore it. I mean, I think for Dan to come out and be that honest, clearly he knew there was an issue. I think they really like Ejiro Evero's scheme. I think that's clear by keeping him. They did, remove some guys from the coaching staff, add some new guys who've gotten some pretty good buzz around the league. But I think from their perspective, it was all about talent, and I think they dove head first into that free agency pool and made it a priority to bring in 5 guys to kind of fill out the roster.
And Dan Morgan said something. He said a lot of interesting things there to you, but the talk of platoons on the defensive line, it's giving baseball there, but how does he view kind of platooning the defensive line, and how did their work in free agency kind of lend itself to how he views that? Because obviously they didn't get the one cleanup hitter and Milton Williams, but they got a lot of guys that they can plug in and out.
Sure. And as baseball fans, you and I could probably talk about this till we're, blue in the face. But what I would say is if you look at the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl this past year, the Chiefs and the Eagles, they historically have had platoon groups where, there's a specific package that has two or three guys that favor that package, and then you move on and you get into another package and another 3 guys come in. It's about efficiency. It's about keeping guys healthy. It's about showing different looks. They bring in Bobby Brown, who is built like a natural nose tackle in a 3-4 defense, but they feel like he can move around quite a bit. They feel like at 24, he's got a lot of upside to explore, especially from a versatility standpoint. And then you look at Turk Wharton, a guy who has a history with Brent Tillis from Kansas City, speaking of the Chiefs. He's kind of more of a situational pass rusher. I know a lot was made about his contract, of him getting $15 million per year. But I think when you look at the way the market developed, the ceiling for those guys to get paid was pretty much blown off the roof, by Milton Williams. So, I think they view those guys as guys who can rotate together, along with Derek Brown and A'Shawn Robinson and even Shai Tuttle and Jaden Crumedy. I think the benefit here is Shai Tuttle and Jaden Crumedy and LeBron Ray go from regular, snaps and heavy rolls to being like in the back seat. You know what I mean? Like they're the back of the platoon. If you platoon, center fielders, they're the guy that plays once or twice a week. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think they feel good about that.
All right. Obviously, Dan Morgan, not a general manager who likely thinks he is done with defense at this point. It seems like they're still very obsessed with improving it as much as possible. So I guess I'll just go the other way. Like, what is the scenario in which Carolina actually takes an offensive player at number one? And is there any scenario they do that if they stick at 8?
I actually think the only way they take an offensive player is if they have to stick at 8. I've talked to a lot of people that cover the draft. I've talked to people around the league, and it just kind of feels like after those first 5 or so non-QBs, this draft goes from having like a great talent pool to having a good, not great talent pool. Like if you ask most evaluators, I think they would tell you from like picks 7 through 20, there isn't a ton of separation. So most teams are going to want to trade back and get value to add to those commonly ranked players, especially if you have a bunch of them. The issue is, and I saw Ian Rappaport bring this up earlier today on Thursday when we're recording this, he said it doesn't feel like a lot of teams want to trade up. Well, yeah, everybody's value is pretty comparable. So unless you're like really in need of like an offensive tackle and Will Campbell came off the board and you want to get the second offensive tackle at 8 and trade up, which I could see a team like the Bears at 10, the 49ers at 11, the Cowboys at 12, and the Dolphins at 13 aspiring to do. It's just a matter of price. And so if they're not giving up a 3rd round pick, or they're not swapping out 2nd round picks to where you're picking earlier, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you don't want to take a loss. And so if you can't have interest or you can't get good return, and Tet McMillan from Arizona, or even Tyler Warren from Penn State, or Matthew Golden from Texas could make sense. I mean, they also have left, Ike Kwanu's 5th-year option kind of open-ended. Taylor Moton's in the final year of his deal. They haven't reworked that. Could they take an offensive tackle? I think that would be the surprise move, although I don't think it's all worth, ruling out.
You ready for 2 more weeks of Tet McMillan discourse, Mike? You brought him up, but, he seems to be the polarizing receiver because he is the receiver if somebody's going to take one that early. Does anything that he does clash with what the Panthers have already? And are they in a position to kind of have a type for receiver other than just, no, he's really talented and he can help Bryce Young?
Well, I think those are both separate but great questions. So I think with Tet, he is a better jump ball catcher than anybody on this team by a mile. He's also probably has the best body control of anybody that would be on this roster. That said, this offensive unit, not just wide receiver, but like tight end, running back, is probably the slowest, if not one of the slowest offensive groups we've seen in a really long time. There's just no flash to them whatsoever. That doesn't mean they're not good, but you wonder, do you just take another guy who's not known as a burner and put him out there, and then teams know, like, yeah, we can sacrifice. We know that the Panthers want to run the ball, so we'll stack the box because we know that once McMillan catches it, he's probably going to be tackled. Like, he's not a yards after catch kind of guy, typically. If he's going for jump balls, it's a jump ball, and wherever that ball is, then it's done. And so I think he's intriguing. I would not hate on them for taking him 8th overall. I think from a fit standpoint, it does kind of feel like they could use some speed and quickness there. And then, I think the philosophy standpoint, wide receiver is a premium pick, but like, if you like and don't love a guy and there's the option to trade back, you always should go and trade back, especially if you have multiple guys that are graded pretty comparably.
Is there any part of this draft where that speed at receiver lives? And we'll get into the Panthers' assets in a bit, but what part of the draft do you think that could be, that speed lives for them?
Well, I think a trade back to 13 or 12 gives you the option of Matthew Golden, who's my favorite wide receiver in the class. Is extremely quick. He reminds me a lot of Brandon Cooks. But I think they're going to have options on day 2. I mean, they don't pick till 57, but if they do a trade back and are able to better equip themselves in the second round or what have you, I think, there's a pair of wide receivers from Iowa State who are really interesting. I like Jaylen Royals from Utah State, though I don't know what their outlook is on him. I think there is speed there, but I also think, don't take the cheese, you know what I mean? Like the bait there. I think if they can get a quick tight end who's a move tight end who can complement Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders, I think that helps your unit. Like Terrence Ferguson, who I reported visited with them for a top 30 visit, he's got a lot of speed at that position. Mason Taylor from LSU is a really good tight end, and he's got really good athleticism. I think they have to be creative with how they attack this, because I do not think this is a great wide receivers class, but I think it's better than advertised. And if you can be creative and use the tight end class, which is considered very good, to your advantage, I think you can double dip in a way where you can add a couple of pass catchers that make this offense a tad more dynamic.
We've seen Jalen Walker slide up and down a little bit. I've seen, Panthers X or whatever have reactions from absolutely he's our guy because he knows who Thomas Davis is, to he's not worth a top 10 pick, to we really hope he's there at 8. Where are you kind of landing on Jalen Walker 2 weeks before this draft when it comes to Carolina?
Yes. Here's what I would say. Philosophically, I think taking a hybrid player that you're most likely going to use as a off-the-ball linebacker first 2 downs and a pass rusher on 3rd down is setting this kid up for failure. It's one thing to say he can do it. It's another thing to say that he can excel and then elevate in doing it. And I think you look at the guys that are all the rage right now. Frankie Louvu wasn't drafted. He also wasn't signed to be Frankie Louvu or what he's doing. By the way, he's played exponentially better in Washington than he did in this system a couple of years ago. Ejiro Evero didn't really show much interest in using Jeremy Chin, another hybrid linebacker safety sort of guy who had, a wide range. Nobody drafted Andrew Van Ginkel in the 5th round for him to be what he is right now, which is what a lot of people perceive Jalen Walker to be. And then you look at somebody like Zach Bond, who was used out of position for years. Like Isaiah Simmons and Xavier Collins, pretty much anybody Arizona drafted during the Steve Keim era on defense basically bombed out because they couldn't figure out how to use them. And I think you're behind the 8 ball if you're trying to get a guy to learn multiple positions, because there's a learning curve in the NFL. It doesn't matter if you're a really good kid or if you study really hard, but if you're being used all around the front, one, it's going to bite into the development of other people, but you're also going to have this mishmash of a lineup. They need to get just great players or good players. And trust me, Jalen Walker is a very, very good player. I just don't know if they're at the point right now where you feel good about the defensive situation. Yes, you've retained Evero, but who's to say they don't do really well this year in spite of having Jalen Walker, right? And then he goes and gets a head coaching job. Or more likely scenario, the defense doesn't work again, and then you're moving on from the defensive coordinator. What happens when the next defensive coordinator comes in and says, I want to put him here? So now you're a year behind the development, and it's just I don't know. Just philosophically, I wouldn't agree with drafting him to be a hybrid player. Now, if he's your number 2 edge on your board and you're going to use him as a full-time edge, by all means, go for it. Is he a great fit for that? He's very small. He's got pretty short limbs for an edge rusher. But Elvis Dumerville worked out, and he was 2 inches shorter. So, it's about trusting your coaching staff and having a plan. I also just think, sometimes being the smartest guy in the room typically makes you the guy with the dunce cap. And I just think, that's a guy that let somebody else miss or hit on. You know what I mean? Is it worth it when you are 5-12 was seen as a success last year in a few different ways because of how low the bar was? You have to win right now. And I know I'm rambling right now. I think Jaylen Walker's a really good player. I think Tet McMillan's a really good player. If I were them, I would not love any of these guys. And I would pray for Mason Graham to fall. And I know they've drafted they've signed 2 really expensive defensive linemen. You can never have enough in the trenches, is my belief. I also think there are better natural edge rushers than Jaylen Walker. I think there are better fits for this offense than Tet McMillan. And so those are 2 guys that are getting a lot of discussion, and I get it. They're really, really good players, but I don't know if they fit the Panthers in this time and space. And while you want to say, hey, get the best player available, this team also needs to win. And win soon. I mean, I don't know how much longer David Tepper can preach patience here. And you held on to the assistant GM who you promoted to GM, and you've held on to this, and you've got this young, exciting head coach. Well, young and exciting gets old and boring when you lose. And so I think that's something they really needed to understand.
What do you think the sweet spot is for a first-round trade? Where to go back to, what you can pick up asset-wise to add to your coffers already, and what type of player you would want to get there? Maybe some name, I know there's the cornerback out of Michigan. There's obviously Michael Williams. What range would you want to go back? Trade or Mike?
If it were me, I'd want to get to 17, and it would be the Bengals, and I would want to say, hey, look, things aren't working with you and Trey Hendrickson with this negotiation. Do you want to get the second or third best edge rusher? Trade up with us, give us your second-round pick, or give us a third-round pick and your first-round pick next year, or give us swap second-round picks with us and give us a third-round pick and then a third-round pick next year. You've got to be creative here, because teams don't naturally want to trade up, but you have to find teams that might be begrudgingly stupid enough to do it. Now, speaking of stupid, the Dallas Cowboys and Miami Dolphins seem like absolute marks for trade-ups, especially because I think Will Campbell's going to go early in this top 10. And so then I think with them both needing offensive tackles and both of the GMs / owner being obsessed with running backs, I think Genty at 8 makes a ton of sense for a trade up for them. I don't think it'll be too expensive for their blood. If you can trade back there and swap second-round picks and get a third-round pick, you're better off on day 2. You've got 2 third-round picks and a better second-round pick, which is what they should be hoping for. I think that makes sense. And then once you get there, we're talking about, I can't pronounce the BC kid's pass rusher's name. He's probably my favorite. I'm going to call him Donovan EZ. Because I can't even pronounce his last name. I'm not even going to try. Joe Person will make fun of me, like he always does. But the Boston College pass rusher is my favorite edge rusher in this class outside of Abdul Carter. And I think sometimes it's okay to overdraft guys if you know that they are productive. I mean, he was an absolute force for BC.
Yep.
His testing numbers are great. He reminds me a lot of Cliff Averill. And then I brought him up with Golden. If you want to go offense, Golden would be my guy. And so I think if you can get one of those guys between that 12 to 17 range, and you get an extra third-round pick and maybe a better second-round pick, you were, throwing a bar mitzvah party in between day 1 and day 2, I think, at Bank of America Stadium.
So you mentioned production, and I don't really want to do 10 minutes on Shamar Stewart. It's been discussed, but obviously Texas A&M, 4.5 sacks. But how do you think, in the limited time we've had to understand Dan Morgan and Dave Canales, how do you think they view college production, especially when you're trying to figure out who the future of your, let's stay with defense here, is in the first round?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between being a production seeker and a production realist. And so I would say, so I saw the comps from his timings and everything. Myles Garrett was the comp for all of his testing numbers. Well, cool and all, but if a guy is good, why isn't he good? You know what I mean? We hear about this all the time, with pitchers, right? They're so volatile, but there has to be a bar, right? And I think 1.5 sacks every year, that's another one of those. Let somebody else get fired. You know what I mean? Cool. If he's awesome, whoops. Like, it's not like he's one of those Georgia players where the way the Georgia works is they coach them to win a championship. They're not coaching them to be NFL talents.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of guys that are kind of used out of position, and then they get to the league, and it takes them a year or two for it to click. And then once it clicks, like you see Nolan Smith becoming this excellent edge rusher for the Eagles. You see Jaylen Carter after a first year kind of being like, now he's in consideration for All Pro. Like, Wyatt, I forgot his first name. He's doing really well. Like, there's like so many examples of Georgia kids that just like, especially on defense, once they got to the next level and they didn't have to be read, react, or gap integrity guys, became better. And so I think it'd be one thing if it was that system where there's a history, like with Travon Walker, who went from being like kind of like the first overall pick because he had all the tools, to being and mocked for a couple of years, to then becoming actually a really good player for the Jaguars for the most part once they unlocked him, even though they were bad. So let somebody else get fired over that. I don't think he is a fit for this team.
All right, so Panthers fans have known Dan Morgan for like a quarter century, but last year they met Trader Dan. Did he trade in every upcoming pick last year? I know it was a frenetic night. Obviously, round one.
I want to say
it was
third
close.
round. I think third round they stayed.
Yeah.
Or no. Fourth round they stayed put. That's when they took Jatavian Sanders. Third round I don't remember, but yeah, they did work up and down the board. I don't think they'll be as like fluid in this draft just because you're going, let's say they pick at 8, they don't pick for like another 49 selection. So you're like looking at like this huge drop off. Like, if I'm them and I can't get a trade back, I'm looking for ways to trade up with my 9 picks. They have 3 fifth-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks. I'm using probably a fourth-round pick to get up there in the second round. I would not want to pick a 57 if you're picking at 8. Now, if they trade back, then I could see them, doing what they kind of did last year where they traded back in the second. They used 39 as an asset, which was something that I heavily criticized the previous regime for the previous year. When you pick in the top 40 and you've already picked once, that second pick is so valuable. The Panthers, on the the Panthers had 2 top 40 second round picks, and so they were able to kind of maneuver out the board, and then they went and got Leggett, and then they got the value back in trading with the Rams and got that second round pick for this year. Because could you imagine if they went from 8 to 74 this year? What a weight!
Especially I don't know. We would just go home, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know I would. But here's what I would say. I think they learned some lessons from this previous draft. I think they're a year wiser. I think there were examples of, like, if they could go back with the trade back, I think they would have been a little bit more aggressive about trading back up in the second round. I think when you look at the way the draft kind of settled in, maybe they would have done a few things differently. I just think like the late round picks were kind of interesting, but for the most part, I think they'll be fine now that they have these 9 picks.
Just a few more minutes, Mike, and I'll let you get to some baseball if you can even watch it tonight. But how I feel like Trayvon Merrick, their new safety, is like that GIF from that Netflix show about Escobar where he's just sitting by himself in various spots. I feel like that's the safety room right now. Like, what can they possibly do? What do you think they might do with that safety room in 2 weeks and then leading up to late July training camp?
I think, as I reported earlier this month, they met with Marcus Williams, they met with Julian Blackmon. I think those 2 guys are still very much in play, especially Blackmon. I think he's a really good compliment for Merrick. It's just a matter of like deciding what their value is. I think this is all a money thing. And so I think they can kind of double tap and double dip, or whatever term you want to use, in the draft. I think safety is actually a pretty good class to where I think you could get a couple of guys in the 4th or 5th round and feel good about them, and then sign Julian Blackmon after the draft, and then you're stocked. I would say last year the biggest issue, and as I wrote in the story you referenced earlier, and as Dan said, I think tackling and technique were like massive issues for this group. Like honestly, they were playing like 5 safeties, and only one of them, Xavier Woods, had any business being on defense until Damani Richardson got called up. And even him, I think you're better off with him being a 3rd or 4th safety. So they have work to do. They know it. I think it's probably top 3 on their list of internal needs. That doesn't mean that it'll be a top 3 selection for them, but I do think safety is a big deal to them. They know they need to get it right. I'd argue it was the 2nd biggest culprit in their run defensive issues. Like once you got past the front 7, you were going to get a ton of yards after contact.
Just a few more minutes, Mike. Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer. Last question. What do you think this draft could tell us about the way Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are trying to build up this franchise?
Well, I think it's strategic. I think they will go pretty defense heavy in this draft. I would be stunned if they didn't. I think they're going to be very deliberate. I think this offseason was very deliberate. Last offseason was very deliberate too. I don't think that they are quite as concerned about the 29th ranked offense, basically because they know they have Canales guys who were once Rule guys or Reich guys. I mean, I think they have a good core, or they feel they have a good core. And so I think it's about just like expanding that core. So they feel good about Xavier Legette. That was not lip service. They feel really good about Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. I think Jalen Coker's somebody who intrigues them. He really showed some flashes last year. They trust, David Moore and Adam Thielen, and they love the offensive line. So I think it's about picking your spots and adding the right pieces, not just pieces to this offense. But defensively, they know they not only need depth, they need competition, they need just better players. Like that defense, if you're Dan Morgan and as a former linebacker, had to be just brutal to watch every week. I mean, the missed like you and I could have been out there and missed the same amount of tackles.
All right, he is Mike Kaye. Great wrap there. Basically letting us hit posts. Charlotte Observer at Mike_E_K. You can check out his work there. I know he's pumping it out over the next couple of weeks. And draft is in 2 weeks on April 24th. We're going to have weekly conversations right here inside our WCNC Live Impact studio all the way leading up to draft night. And then we are full go on draft night as the Panthers start us off at pick 8, or maybe they won't. Mike, thanks.